We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Something brought you here. Not a click, not curiosity, not even coincidence. There are no coincidences when the soul begins to stir. There is only the silent language of remembrance, a vibration beneath the noise. A question that begins as a whisper and grows louder the more you try to ignore it. Am I waking up? It doesn't begin with thunder. It begins quietly. A restlessness that visits you in the early hours. A sense that your name is too small for what you feel. Your life might look the same. The same walls, the same skin, the same morning coffee. But something underneath has shifted. You don't remember choosing it, this feeling, this pull. But it's there. Like gravity in reverse. Not pulling you down, but into the marrow of what you are. You start noticing things. Patterns, numbers, strange alignments. You think of someone and they call. You ask a silent question and a book opens to the answer. The music on the radio knows your thoughts. First, you brush it off. Coincidence. Confirmation bias. But part of you, the part that's been quiet for so long, smiles in recognition. These are not tricks. They are signals. Reality, humming just beneath the veil, saying, you're getting warmer. And then comes the dissonance. The life that once fit now feels tight, like clothes you've outgrown overnight. You find yourself staring into the middle of conversations, wondering why they sound like echoes of a world you no longer live in. What once gave you pride now feels hollow. What once made sense now collapses under a single breath of intuition. No one tells you that awakening doesn't feel like bliss at first. It feels like unraveling, like remembering a language you never learned but always knew. It's not about learning more, it's about unforgetting. About brushing away the dust of conditioning until your essence begins to gleam through the cracks. Some nights it feels like madness. Other nights it feels like home. And the question isn't what's happening to me, but what is trying to wake within me. Let that question breathe inside you. Let it echo, because what follows is not a teaching. It is a return. You begin to feel like your entire life has been a dream layered atop another dream, and now something is shaking the fabric loose. The edges blur. The stories unravel. And what remains is not confusion, but a strange clarity, like remembering your name after forgetting it for lifetimes. There is a wordless knowing rising through your spine, a sense that you've walked these paths before, spoken these thoughts in tongues older than any book. And it's not just your thoughts that shift, it's your perception. The world becomes more alive. The wind doesn't just blow, it speaks. The trees don't just sway, they remember. Everything pulses with an unseen intelligence. And you, once a stranger to your own breath, start to recognize the rhythm within you as the same rhythm that moves the stars. Awakening isn't an escape. It's a descent into yourself, into your forgotten depths. It's not about floating above pain or transcending the human story. It's about entering it fully, eyes open, heart bared, soul uncloaked. It's realizing that the body you inhabit, the emotions you feel, the thoughts that rise and fall, all of it is sacred. All of it is the curriculum of remembering. And slowly, 7 signs begin to shape themselves from the mist. Not as teachings written on paper, but as lived echoes within your cells. The first is subtle, but once seen, it cannot be unseen. The end of coincidence. The death of chance. You begin to sense the weave behind the visible, the intelligence behind the timing. The idea that anything is random becomes impossible to sustain. You start noticing synchronicities, moments so precise they defy logic. Like when you're thinking of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and suddenly they message you. Or you glance at the clock and it's 11:11 again. Or you overhear a stranger say exactly what you've been afraid to admit to yourself. Numbers follow you. Symbols repeat. Messages arrive in dreams, in overheard words, in the tilt of a stranger's smile. It's not the world that's changed. It's your frequency. Like tuning a radio, you've slipped into a new wavelength, one where meaning hums beneath everything. And the more you trust this rhythm, the more it reveals itself. This is not magic. This is memory. The second sign is dissonance. What once comforted you now confines you. The rules, the systems, the masks, they no longer fit. Maybe you wake up and realize you can't make yourself care about your job anymore. Maybe the conversations you used to enjoy now feel scripted. Maybe you're in a room full of people and still feel like you're somewhere else entirely. You begin to feel the weight of your own conditioning, and with it, a yearning to be naked in truth. Not impressive, not successful, just real. The illusions crack not because they are weak, but because you have grown too large to live inside them. And though it may look like loss, what's really happening is shedding. Not rejection, but return to the essence you buried to survive. This isn't a crisis. It's an initiation. Are you ready to remember more? And yet, no one around you seems to notice the change. They speak the same words, walk the same loops, tethered to lives that no longer call to you. You begin to feel alone in a crowd, awake in a dream. But even in this loneliness, there's something holy because for the first time, you are choosing presence over performance. You are no longer trying to fit into a world that was never built for the full expression of your soul. This brings the third sign, a magnetic pull toward ancient truths. Books you would have once ignored now vibrate in your hands. Names like Hermes Trismegistus, Atlantis, the Akasha, they echo in your mind like déjà vu, not discovery. Sacred symbols draw your eye, not because they're beautiful, but because they remind you of what you can't yet say. But the recognition is too deep to be dismissed. You begin to sense that history is not linear, that wisdom was not lost, only hidden. You scroll past a quote on social media and your chest tightens. You buy a book on ancient symbols without knowing why. A dream lingers, a temple, a chant, a language you don't speak but somehow understand, buried not in ruins, but in you. You don't study this knowledge. You remember it. And every remembrance rewrites the story of who you thought you were. Then, the fourth sign, heightened sensitivity. Sounds grow louder, light becomes sharper. The energy of places and people lingers in your skin. You walk into a supermarket and feel drained after 5 minutes. You cry during a commercial. You can't watch violent movies anymore. Your body reacts before your mind can rationalize. What used to be background noise is now symphony. You feel more joy, grief, love, dissonance, all amplified. And though it can be overwhelming, part of you understands. Your senses aren't broken. They are awakening. You're not fragile. You're becoming attuned to emotion, to energy, to the invisible threads that connect everything. You start to sense what others are feeling without words. You walk into a room and know the story before anyone speaks. And this doesn't make you powerful. It makes you responsible. To protect your field. To choose resonance over noise. To listen, not just with ears, but with the whole of your being. And in the quiet of that listening, something ancient begins to stir. A longing not just to feel more, but to become more. You start to notice patterns. Loops, events that return again and again in new clothing, same lesson, new form. This is the fifth sign, the spiral. The realization that your life is not a line, but a spiral of growth and remembering. Each turn of the wheel brings you back to a familiar point, but from a higher vantage. It's the same kind of relationship, the same argument, the same feeling of being unseen. But this time, something's different. You pause. You breathe. You choose differently, even if just a little. and you finally understand you are not failing. You are evolving. You do not need to start over. You need only to see the cycle, to bless it, and to choose differently. Because awakening isn't a destination. It's a spiral staircase of remembrance. And you've already begun the climb. There comes a moment, almost imperceptible, when time itself begins to lose its edges. Not just the minutes and hours on a clock, but the idea that your life is confined to a single timeline. This is the sixth sign. Time unfolds like breath, not linear but layered. You wake from dreams that feel more real than your waking days. You meet strangers and feel lifetimes pulsing in their eyes. A song, a scent, a place you've never been floods your chest with ache. Not from longing, but from recognition. You're cooking dinner and suddenly remember a dream from years ago, and it feels more vivid than the room you're in. You walk down a new street and feel like you've been there 1,000 times. A child says something to you that stops you in your tracks. You are not imagining it. You are bleeding through the veil. Memories rise from the bones, not as images but as resonance. Knowledge you were never taught sings through your hands. You find yourself speaking truths you never read, understanding rituals you never studied. It is not fantasy. It is encoded wisdom, stirring from slumber. Time becomes less of a measure and more of a mirror, reflecting what the soul has always known. You are older than this body. And finally, the seventh sign, the one that changes everything. You no longer chase information. You begin to trust your inner knowing. The hunger to consume transforms into the desire to listen. You stop seeking outside for what you've carried all along. You stop Googling every feeling. You stop asking others what they think you should do. You sit on your kitchen floor, heart racing, and realize, I already know. The world teaches you to collect. Awakening teaches you to shed, to unlearn, to unbind. And in that sacred unburdening, a stillness grows. In that stillness you remember. You are not here to become. You are here to remember. The soul does not need to be improved. It needs to be revealed. And what reveals it is presence. Raw, unfiltered, trembling presence. This is not a philosophy. It is a frequency. You don't awaken through effort. You awaken through surrender. And if you are here, if these words resonate not with your mind but with your marrow, then it has already begun. You are remembering not who the world told you to be, but who you've always been beneath the forgetting. And it is this remembrance that will set everything in motion. The path forward doesn't come with a map, but with a pulse. A soft rhythm that thumps beneath the noise, beneath the plans and goals and performances. It doesn't shout, it hums. And the more you listen, the clearer it becomes. This inner compass doesn't point north, it points inward. Toward places you've avoided, toward truths you once feared, toward the divine architecture hidden in your scars. Because awakening is not light without shadow. It is not bliss without breakdown. It is seeing all of yourself, the sacred and the shattered, and choosing to hold it all in love. You start to realize that healing is not about fixing what's broken, but about remembering what was buried. That your pain was never a punishment, only a passage. That the emotions you've been taught to numb were never mistakes, but messengers. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to shift. Not in what you do, but in how you be. You start to speak less and listen more. Not out of fear, but reverence. You start to trust the pauses between thoughts, the space between words. You no longer need to prove your worth, you feel it like a flame in your chest. You stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, what wants to move through me? Your life becomes less about achievement and more about alignment. Not with the world's rhythm, but with your soul's. And this is where the true awakening begins. Not with fireworks, but with stillness. Not with certainty, but with surrender. You realize that you're not here to master the universe. You're here to remember that you are the universe in form, in breath, in motion. The old you doesn't die, it softens. And in its place, something ancient takes root. A remembering so deep it doesn't need words. It lives in your walk, in your silence, in the way you touch the world. Because awakening isn't a thing you do. It's what happens when you stop pretending to be asleep. And when you stop pretending, when the masks fall not with force but with grace, the world begins to mirror something different back to you. People shift. Circumstances reconfigure. The chaos doesn't disappear, but your relationship to it transforms. You no longer seek peace outside yourself because you have found the seed of it within. And that seed, once watered by presence, begins to bloom in ways the rational mind could never orchestrate. Synchronicities multiply, not because the universe has changed, but because you have tuned to its language. You are no longer asking for signs. You are becoming one. You are no longer trying to attract. You are remembering that you radiate. You are no longer trying to manifest from lack. You are creating from remembrance. Each day becomes less about doing and more about being. Less about building an identity and more about revealing a soul. And you understand finally deeply that this journey is not linear. It is not a ladder. It is not a test. It is a spiral. You revisit the same wounds but from higher ground. You re-encounter the same fears, but now they soften in your gaze. You return to the same questions, but the answers are no longer important. The listening is, because the truth you were seeking was never a destination. It was a frequency. And as you attune to that frequency, not through striving but through surrender, you begin to see with ancient eyes. You begin to feel with the whole of your being. You begin to live not from memory, but from soul. The self you once clung to dissolves like mist at dawn, not in defeat, but in revelation. And what emerges is not a new you, but the you that always was, beneath the forgetting, waiting like a seed in winter, untouched by the storm, untouched by time. It didn't need to be fixed. It needed to be felt. And now, as the layers fall away, shame, doubt, performance, urgency. What's left is not emptiness, but essence. Not silence, but signal. And you begin to hear it, the slow, golden rhythm of your original being. You remember now that this awakening was never a sudden event. It was a long unfolding, stretched across lifetimes, scattered in dreams, encoded in pain and beauty alike. Every heartbreak, every turning away, every echo in the night that once sounded like loneliness was part of the calling back. Not to a belief, not to a doctrine, but to your own frequency, to your signature in the great song of being. And as you align with that sound, that tone that belongs only to you, your life shifts from survival to symphony. You are no longer reacting, you are responding. You are no longer bracing, you are opening. The world doesn't suddenly become easy, but it becomes meaningful. Even the ache becomes holy. Even the waiting becomes womb. You start to see others differently too, not as roles or reflections of your wounds, but as souls on their own spiral of remembrance. And compassion no longer comes from effort, it comes from recognition. You see in them the same forgetting. You feel in them the same spark. You become a mirror not of perfection, but of permission. To feel, to remember, to return. And the more you live in this state, not always, not perfectly, but honestly, the more your very presence becomes an invitation. You speak less. You radiate more. You offer no answers, but something in your silence makes people ask better questions. Because the awakened don't shout. They vibrate. And in that vibration, something ancient stirs in others. Not a lesson, not a rule, but a resonance. The kind that moves beneath words, beneath logic, beneath the architecture of thought. You find that presence alone begins to alter rooms, shift moods, open something tender in those who've forgotten how to soften. Not because you are trying, but because you are remembering. You become less interested in convincing and more devoted to embodying. You no longer argue about truth, you radiate it. You no longer chase love, you become it. And this isn't some performance of light. It includes your shadows. It honors your edges. The awakened self doesn't float above the world. It roots into it. Fully, fiercely, gently, you feel your feet again. On the earth, in your life, in this strange, luminous dance of being human. Not to transcend it, but to sanctify it. And the more you live this way, the more you see the spiral turning behind everything. You see it in the cycles of nature, in the rise and fall of emotion, in the births and deaths that shape your inner seasons. You begin to understand that evolution is not upward, it is inward, downward, deeper, not into more answers but into more truth. And truth, once it awakens, doesn't demand that you follow it. It simply shines. You realize you're not here to escape your humanity. You are here to consecrate it. Your anger becomes clarity. Your grief becomes prayer. Your longing becomes compass. You no longer need to know the outcome, you trust the unfolding. You no longer crave arrival, you become the road. And every step you take echoes through the unseen, calling others not with your voice, but with your vibration. Come home, come home, come home. And this homecoming, it's not a place, not a doctrine, not a fixed identity etched in stone. It's a return to fluidity, to mystery, to the breath between thoughts. It's not found in temples or teachings, but in the quiet tremble that moves through your chest when you stand still long enough to feel your soul remembering itself. You are no longer chasing the light. You are no longer resisting the dark. You begin to sense that they were never in conflict, only two hands of the same body reaching for wholeness. And so you soften into yourself, into others, into the rhythm that has always been guiding you, whether you named it or not. This is the paradox of awakening. The more you remember who you truly are, the less you need to define it. You don't need titles. You don't need certainty. You don't even need validation, because your existence becomes the only evidence required. Not because it proves anything, but because it is. And then, in the stillness of a morning or the pause between heartbeats, you realize something so simple, so quiet, it almost slips by unnoticed. You were never asleep. Not truly. Not deeply. Not completely. There was always a spark. There was always that small, stubborn flame. Beneath the numbness, beneath the noise, beneath the forgetting. A flicker of self that refused to be extinguished. And now it grows, not into fire, but into warmth. Steady, ancient, remembered. So you walk, not towards something, but as something, as truth, as presence, as a living question wrapped in breath. Because the awakened don't carry the answers. They carry the light by which others remember how to ask. And when others begin to ask, not with their mouths, but with their hearts, you feel it. A ripple in the unseen. A resonance answering resonance. Not because you taught them, but because you were. Because you stood as a mirror, unpolished and whole, reflecting the sacred in their silence. That's how remembrance spreads, not by force, but by frequency. You stop thinking in terms of mission. That word grows heavy, too linear, too sharp. What pulses in you now is not a task to be completed, but a current to be carried. You are not here to fix the world. You are here to weave it, thread by thread, gaze by gaze, moment by moment, each breath a stitch in the invisible cloth of awakening. And you'll falter. Of course, you'll falter. The old forgetting is strong, and the world is loud. Some days you'll slip back into doubt, into urgency, into the brittle voice that says you're not enough, not ready, not real. But now you recognize it. You name it gently. You hold it like an old friend with trembling hands and say, I remember you, but I do not follow you anymore. This too is awakening. Not a state you attain, but a rhythm you return to. Not perfection, but presence again and again. And as this rhythm deepens, you begin to feel the tapestry, the invisible network of souls weaving alongside you. Not near necessarily, but close in essence. You haven't met them all, and you may never, but you feel them. In the wild synchronicities, in the rising wave of collective memory, in the unspoken bond that exists between those who have tasted silence and called it home. You begin to live in two worlds, and they are not separate. The inner and the outer fold into one. The seen and the unseen braid like breath and pulse. And in that weaving, you become not just a witness, but a doorway. A reminder that the sacred was never elsewhere. That the temple is here, in the pause, in the gaze, in the way you hold a stranger's name in your mouth with reverence. That every moment is a bell that can ring you awake, if you're listening. And now you are listening. You are listening not just with ears, but with the spaces between your thoughts, with the skin of your being, with the quiet ache that no longer feels like emptiness but like invitation. And in this listening, a new kind of language begins to shape itself. Not of words, but of frequencies, of inner knowing that moves through you like tide. You walk slower now, not because you are lost, but because you are no longer rushing toward a version of yourself that was never yours to begin with. You are no longer trying to arrive. You are learning to inhabit, to rest in the aliveness of each breath, to feel the miracle of existence pulsing behind even the most ordinary moment. You start to see how everything conspired for this. Every detour, every silence, every heartbreak and hesitation. Not as tests, not as punishments, but as codes, perfectly timed openings into deeper remembrance. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was ever outside the path. The spiral includes everything. And in this realization, forgiveness becomes effortless. Not a concept or a virtue, but a natural release, like an exhale you didn't know you were holding. You begin to forgive the world, not because it asked for it, but because you no longer wish to carry the weight of forgetting. You forgive the self you once judged. You forgive the people who mirrored your unhealed parts. You forgive the story, all of it, and in doing so, you free yourself from the illusion that anything ever went wrong. This is not bypassing. This is alchemy. You see the pain, but you see through it. You see the shadow, and you see its sacred task. You see the fear, and behind it, the longing to return to love. This is the gaze of the awakened. Tender, unflinching, whole. And from this gaze, you begin to live. Not as someone who has mastered life, but as someone who finally trusts it. Even the mystery, even the not knowing, especially the not knowing, because that too is a sign. You are not here to control the dream. You are here to lucidly live it. And in lucid living, the boundaries between you and the world begin to dissolve. Not in disappearance, but in union. The sky feels like part of your breath. The earth beneath your feet echoes your heartbeat. The stranger passing you on the street carries something familiar in their shoulders, in their sadness, in their smile. Separation begins to feel like an old myth you no longer believe in. And so love, the word too often dressed in hunger and performance, begins to return to its original frequency. It becomes less a need and more a state. One you pour into the simplest gestures. How you listen, how you touch, how you speak with silence when words are too loud. It is not loud itself. It doesn't demand. It doesn't decorate. It radiates. You begin to recognize that awakening does not make you special. It makes you simple. It returns you to humility, not as self-erasure but as sacred awareness. You do not stand above the world. You fall into it fully. You bow not because you are small, but because you finally see the vastness in everything. You are not here to shine so others look at you. You are here to shine so others remember they are light, too. And this light is not perfect. It flickers. It falters. It changes color with the seasons of your soul. But it endures not because you protect it, but because you finally stop hiding it. You learn to speak your truth with reverence, to say no without violence, to say yes without fear. You allow your life to become poetry, not crafted, but lived. And even in pain, you begin to sense beauty, not as something pleasant, but as something true. The kind that humbles, the kind that heals. This is the quiet revolution. No banners, no battle cries, just hearts breaking open, one by one, softly, steadily, like petals returning to the sun. And maybe, just maybe, that's all awakening ever was. Not a lightning bolt, not an epiphany, but the slow, holy unpeeling of all that is false, until only the real remains. And the real is always simple, and the real is always love. And when all the words dissolve, when even understanding feels too heavy, there is only this, the breath, the pulse, the quiet witness that was always here. You no longer search for signs because you have become one. You no longer ask what your purpose is because you are living it, not as a plan, but as a presence. Not as a role, but as a rhythm. This is the final remembrance, the one that returns not with fireworks, but with stillness. You were never lost. You were simply layered, covered, folded, wrapped in stories you agreed to carry so you could learn the beauty of unfolding. And now you unfold, softly, silently, petal by petal, not toward a finish line, but into the infinite. There are no more steps, no more signs to interpret, no more paths to follow, because you see, there was never a path. There was only a dance, a spiral, a remembering. You walk now not because you must arrive, but because each step is an echo of the sacred. You speak not to teach, but to vibrate. You rest not because you are tired, but because rest is devotion too. You are not separate from the world. You are not ahead of it. You are not behind it. You are it, dreaming, breathing, remembering itself through your form. And if you forget again, as you will, as we all do, may that forgetting be soft. May it be a veil that invites the next return. Because awakening does not happen once. It happens endlessly each time you choose to come back to what is real, to what is felt, to what has no name but every knowing. And so, beloved spark in a sea of stars, walk gently now. The world does not need your certainty. It needs your remembrance. And if something within you stirred, not as a thought but as a vibration, then the remembering has already begun. It needs no proof, no permission. Only your yes, only your breath, only your willingness to follow what feels like home, even if no one else can see the path. There is no need to rush. The spiral will bring you back again and again. You are not behind. You are right on time. Welcome back. If this journey touched something ancient in you, consider sharing that echo. Leave a trace in the form of a review, a word, a whisper. And if you feel called to walk deeper with us, subscribe not to follow but to remember together. The remembering is always stronger in resonance.